Saddam Hussein's Fatal Miscalculations, The Road to Invasion. Chapter 1, The Phantom Arsenal, March 2003. American tanks rolled across the Kuwaiti border into Iraq. Saddam Hussein sat in one of his palaces, surrounded by generals who had been lying to him for over a decade. He was about to discover that the weapons he thought would save him didn't exist. But to understand how the most powerful dictator in the Middle East walked into his own destruction, we need to go back to 1991. The first fatal mistake, believing his own propaganda. February 1991. The Gulf War had just ended. Saddam stood before his cabinet in Baghdad declaring victory. His army had been decimated. Kuwait was lost. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqi soldiers were dead or captured. Yet Saddam called it the mother of all battles, a win for Iraq. His generals knew the truth. They'd watched American aircraft obliterate Iraqi positions from altitudes their Soviet-made systems couldn't reach. They'd seen precision bombs destroy bridges, command centers, and Republican Guard divisions with terrifying accuracy. But when General Wafiq al-Samarrai tried to present honest casualty figures, Saddam cut him off. "We fought the greatest military power on earth to a standstill," Saddam said. "They wanted to occupy Baghdad. Where are they now?" The room fell silent. No one dared contradict him. This was Saddam's first mistake, and it would poison every decision he made for the next 12 years. He convinced himself that America had been too weak to finish the job, that American mothers wouldn't tolerate casualties, that his steadfastness had defeated them. He was wrong. America had stopped at Kuwait's border for political reasons, not military ones. But Saddam would spend the next decade believing American power was an illusion. Chapter 2. The bluff that backfired. UN weapons inspectors had left Iraq. Saddam sat in a secure bunker with his closest advisors, including his son-in-law Hussein Kamel, who had just returned from defection in Jordan, a move that would cost him his life within days. Before Kamel's execution, he'd revealed something crucial to the UN. Iraq had destroyed its chemical and biological weapon stockpiles in 1991, right after the Gulf War. Saddam faced an impossible choice. If he admitted the weapons were gone, he looked weak to Iran, his mortal enemy just across the border. Iran had fought Iraq to a bloody stalemate in the 1980s, and Saddam knew they wanted revenge. The illusion of chemical weapons was the only thing keeping Iran's military calculations uncertain. Mistake number 2. The deadly bluff. Saddam decided to play both sides. He'd cooperate just enough with UN inspectors to avoid war with America, but obstruct just enough to keep Iran guessing about his weapons capabilities. "Let them wonder," he told his intelligence chief. "Let the Persians lose sleep over what we might do." His own generals started believing the bluff. When Saddam asked about chemical weapons readiness in military planning sessions, officers would give vague assurances. No one wanted to be the bearer of bad news. No one wanted to end up like Hussein Kamel. A culture of deception took root. Junior officers lied to colonels. Colonels lied to generals. Generals lied to Saddam. And Saddam lied to everyone, including himself. By 2002, even Saddam wasn't entirely sure what weapons he had anymore. His own intelligence services were reporting contradictory information, terrified of telling him the truth. Chapter 3. Misreading America's Resolve, September 11, 2001. Saddam watched the Twin Towers fall on television in Baghdad. His first reaction wasn't sympathy or horror. It was opportunity. "This will tie America down for years," he told his cabinet. "They'll be busy in Afghanistan. They won't have the stomach for another war." Mistake number 3, underestimating American rage. Saddam had spent decades studying American politics. He'd watched Vietnam tear the country apart. He'd seen Bill Clinton withdraw from Somalia after 18 American soldiers died in Mogadishu. He'd observed the American public's low tolerance for casualties. What he didn't understand was that September 11th had changed something fundamental in American psychology. His intelligence services brought him reports of President Bush's speeches, talking about an axis of evil that included Iraq. Saddam dismissed it as rhetoric. "Bush is like his father," Saddam said. "All talk. The American people won't support another war in the Middle East." His advisors who suggested otherwise found themselves removed from positions of influence. One general who warned that America might actually invade was reassigned to a meaningless post in Basra. By late 2002, the Bush administration was making its case for war at the UN. Secretary of State Colin Powell presented intelligence about Iraqi weapons programs. Saddam watched the presentation and laughed. "They have nothing," he said, "because there's nothing to find." He was right about that, but he failed to grasp a crucial point. American certainty that the weapons existed was so strong that the absence of evidence was being treated as evidence of clever concealment. Chapter 4. The Isolation Chamber. January 2003, 2 months before invasion. Saddam met with his Revolutionary Command Council in an underground bunker complex in Baghdad. Mistake number 4. Purging honest voices. Over the previous decade, Saddam had systematically eliminated anyone who might challenge his worldview. His cabinet was filled with yes-men and relatives. His military command structure was designed for loyalty, not competence. General Nizar al-Khazraji, one of Iraq's most capable commanders from the Iran-Iraq War, had defected years earlier. Saddam had him replaced with his son Qusay, who had no military experience but absolute loyalty. The intelligence service that once provided accurate assessments had been gutted after a failed coup attempt in 1996. Now, it told Saddam what he wanted to hear. "Our sources in Washington indicate the Americans are divided," his intelligence chief reported. "The Democrats oppose war. The French and Germans will block any UN resolution. Even if America attacks, our forces will inflict casualties they cannot sustain." Every word was technically true, but the conclusion was fatally wrong. Saddam had created an echo chamber, the few advisors who understood the real threat, that America would invade with or without UN approval, that Iraqi forces would collapse quickly, that the regime's days were numbered, had been silenced, exiled, or executed. One of Saddam's personal bodyguards later recalled a meeting in February 2003 when a mid-level general finally spoke up. "Excellency, perhaps we should consider the possibility that—" Saddam cut him off with a wave. "Considered and dismissed. The Americans will not dare." The general never spoke in meetings again. Chapter 5. The Final Delusion. March 17, 2003. President Bush gave Saddam and his sons 48 hours to leave Iraq. Saddam called an emergency meeting of his top commanders. American forces were massed in Kuwait. British troops were positioned to the south. The war would begin in hours or days. This was the moment. Saddam could surrender. He could go into exile. Several countries had offered him sanctuary. His personal fortune, billions of dollars hidden in banks worldwide, would ensure a comfortable life abroad. Mistake number 5, believing in the unbeatable defense. Instead, Saddam laid out his strategy. Iraqi forces would draw the Americans into Baghdad and other cities. There would be urban warfare, street-to-street fighting. American casualties would mount. The American public would demand withdrawal, just like Vietnam. "We will turn Baghdad into another Stalingrad," Saddam declared. His generals nodded, but several later admitted they knew it was fantasy. Iraqi forces had no training in urban warfare. They had limited ammunition, poor communications, and low morale. Half the army would desert in the first week of fighting, but Saddam believed. He'd spent so long in his palaces, so isolated from reality, that he genuinely thought Iraq could win. One of his bodyguards recalled Saddam's mood in those final hours before the invasion. He was calm, almost cheerful. He truly believed the Americans would fail. The aftermath, March 20th, 2003, 5:34 a.m. Baghdad time. Cruise missiles struck presidential palaces across the city. The invasion Saddam said would never happen had begun. Within 3 weeks, American tanks were in Baghdad. Saddam's statue in Firdos Square was torn down on live television. The Iraqi army had collapsed with minimal resistance. There were no chemical weapons, no biological weapons, no last-minute miracle defense. Saddam went into hiding, moving between safe houses, sleeping on floors, a fugitive in the country he'd ruled for 24 years. On December 13th, 2003, American soldiers found him in a spider hole near Tikrit, his hometown. The man who had executed generals for honest advice was pulled from a hole in the ground, disheveled and defeated. The lesson, written in blood, Saddam Hussein made 5 catastrophic mistakes. 1. He believed his own propaganda about the 1991 Gulf War, convincing himself that American military power was limited by public opinion. 2. He maintained a deadly bluff about weapons of mass destruction, creating uncertainty that would eventually justify the invasion he wanted to prevent. 3. He completely misread how September 11th changed American strategic thinking, failing to understand that the calculation about war had fundamentally shifted. 4. He purged his government of anyone who might tell him uncomfortable truths, surrounding himself with yes men and family members who reinforced his delusions. 5. Even when faced with imminent invasion, he believed in a fantasy defense strategy based on historical parallels that didn't apply. Each mistake compounded the others. The propaganda belief led to the bluff. The bluff led to isolation. The isolation led to miscalculation. And the miscalculation led to the spider hole. Saddam was executed by hanging on December 30th, 2006. His last words were defiant, but historians note something telling. Even at the gallows, he seemed surprised by how things had turned out. He'd spent decades in power, crushing opposition, surviving coup attempts, outlasting rivals. He'd fought an 8-year war with Iran. He'd survived the 1991 Gulf War, but he couldn't survive his own capacity for self-deception. The dictator who built an entire nation around his cult of personality had become the ultimate victim of his own mythology. He believed he was invincible right up until the moment American soldiers pulled him from a hole in the ground.